Duncan Hunter fought in the Battle of Fallujah in 2004 as a member of the Marines. Welcome to you, sir. Good evening.
Hey, Martha.
Talk to me a little bit about what's really going on the ground here, because there's a lot of confusion as to why Fallujah and Ramadi, that you and others fought so hard to secure, since December really have slipped over into a majority of control by al-Qaeda at this point.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. In fact, I don't need a big hearing to figure this one out. You had millions of Americans served. You had Americans die. You have a lot of Americans that have missing limbs because of this area, the Sunni Triangle, and it's very simple. We're not there anymore, and we left too quickly with no leave-behind force. The Obama administration completely failed, and now you have the debacle that you have in Iraq now, and unfortunately, Iraq is gone. That's my opinion. There is no getting this back. If the level is that they're not going to attack their allies or our allies, and they're not going to be able to attack us, then we've succeeded, because they no longer have a dictator. They no longer have somebody that's going to try to build nuclear weapons. But if your idea of success is a peaceful nation that tries to work against Iran and the other evil regimes there in that area, then we've failed. And we also have no ability now to see what's going on. So if al-Qaeda is now training in Iraq like they trained in Afghanistan, here's the really scary part for me. I have a 13-year-old son. I don't want my 13-year-old son to have to join the Marine Corps in 10 years to go back to Iraq to fix the mistakes that this president made when he abandoned everything that we fought for there.
All right. You know, let's go back to that for a moment. The status of forces agreement that was never decided upon, never concluded. Would that have made a difference, or do you feel like troops needed to be there longer to secure a little bit more stability on the ground, or was it never going to take hold?
No, the status of forces agreement would have made sure that we had troops there and enough to do something. I think the military generals at that time asked for about 20,000 troops to remain on the ground. President Obama offered them a few thousand, just like in Afghanistan. Right now, General Dunford, is running Afghanistan, has asked for about 10,000 troops. If he doesn't get 10,000 troops, there's no point in staying in Afghanistan either. So it's the same kind of thing, and what you see from this administration is repeat mistakes, which are the very worst kind. And that's the big problem here. Afghanistan is more complicated because you have a pretty nutty president in President Karzai, but Iraq didn't have that problem. Obama could have focused on Iraq and made sure that all the sacrifices that we fought for and everything that we did and all of those yellow ribbons that people put on their doors and all those stickers on their cars meant something. And right now, they mean nothing because we've now lost what we fought so hard for.
Representative Duncan Hunter, thank you for your service in Fallujah and other places as well. Thank you very much for being here tonight, sir. Very important points. All right, let's talk now to a former Virginia Democratic congressman who strongly opposed the war in Iraq. Tom Perriello is also president and CEO of the Center for American Progress Action Fund. Tom, welcome. Good to have you here tonight. You have been on the ground. Talk to me about the dynamic that's going on there. Who is the ISL? Who are these forces that are moving in to fill this vacuum in Iraq? And how much of this comes from what's going on in Syria?
Well, I really do think right now Syria and the instability there and the al-Qaeda presence there is a great threat. You have a tremendous number of foreign jihadis. I think we have great strategic interests as well as the humanitarian crisis there. The situation in Fallujah obviously has a lot of implications. It's actually gotten slightly better over the last couple of weeks, and a lot of what we left was to let Maliki and the Iraqis own their own government and step up, and you really need to see that government step up. We can't carry the whole weight ourselves. But in the Syria situation, you do have an indigenous Sunni group there of relative moderates who are fighting back against the al-Qaeda presence since January 3rd, and in some cases literally running out of bullets in battles in what's an extremely significant effort to prevent al-Qaeda from having safe havens in and across northern Syria. And I just got back from the border areas on the Turkish side, and you have these very courageous young human rights and democracy activists there who are deeply committed to the idea of having a free Syria still.
Is there anything that can be done? You just heard Representative Hunter. He believes that Iraq is lost. Do you?
I think Iraq is going to remain a challenge where you have Sunni, Shia, and Kurdish dynamics as you've had for a long time. I think what it means to be won or lost has been debated for a long time. I think in terms of their efforts to try to have something that looks like a state there, that's a project that continues. I think Syria is obviously a situation where you've had you have an Assad regime that has just launched a war against his own people, using starvation against women and children, as well as chemical weapons, and is basically said that he will use any tactics necessary to try to continue that war. You have 7 or 8 million human beings who have already been displaced and probably 150,000 dead. I do believe this is a place where the United States and the international community can play a constructive role on everything from the refugee crisis to the hard power considerations, particularly with the increasing al-Qaeda presence there in northern Syria.
Yeah, I think so many Americans, look at the situation and they've had it. They've seen the loss of life. They've seen the loss of limbs. Why should they care? Why should we make an investment, in personal strength in this area?
Well, I really do understand there's a growing isolationism in both parties here in the United States for understandable reasons. We have so much need to invest in our people back home. We've asked so much of our military, as I know Congressman Hunter would agree. And at the same time, these developments show us we can't afford to not care about these situations around the world because they do have implications for us, as well as, I think, moral urgency in the case of the humanitarian crisis. So understand the isolationism, but ultimately these things matter to us and we have to stay engaged.
Tom, you spent a lot of time there on the ground and you know the area as well. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me.